Hello everyone, it is Renee. This year at the Renaissance Festival, I was a summer fairy, and that means that I obviously had to make an unreasonably large prop. So I made this bag, and I'm going to show you how I did that. Okay. So first, we want to go ahead and make a pattern. The simplest way to do this, especially because it's a very simple shape, I just did a miniature version of the seed out of modeling clay. I conditioned it first, just making sure it was actually going to be malleable enough for me to make the shape that I wanted. And I really only focused on getting one side perfect because it is a symmetrical shape. So then I can just mirror it. Mirror. Good Lord, I cannot speak. But I went ahead and took my time to at least get one side perfect. And after I did that, I put it in the freezer for maybe 5 to 10 minutes just so it would harden up while I was, so I could work on it for a long time. And then I used small bits of tape with jagged edges to go ahead and take the pattern. Anytime you're trying to do a pattern or something, using small, like ripped bits of tape works a bit better than using just straight, nicely cut edges, because the small ripped bits kind of layer over each other better and it takes contours better. So after I did that, I went ahead and traced out the reference marks, the registration marks. I knew it started with an R. See, I'm on it today. I went ahead and did that, and I traced out also where I was planning on cutting things. Again, since it's going to be a symmetrical shape, I only had to do one side and make sure I traced those out really nicely. And then after I was happy with that, I cut it off, and then I put it on a piece of printer paper, took a picture of that, and then put that into my computer. I think I used Inkscape, scaled it up and made a mini paper pattern of the pattern I did, and tested that, and that worked out fine. And not tell you the exact scale that I did it to, very sorry about that, but I did blow it up unreasonably large, as you'll see. The first time that I did the pattern, it printed out fine, but I didn't remember to add some kind of like extra registration marks in there. So I went into the Inkscape program and I printed it out using the calendar function. So I kind of ended up using that almost like a doodle grid in a sense. It just helped me line up things better and also get rid of like the extra sheets of paper that didn't actually have anything on them. Also a note, save those pieces of paper because you can just flip them over and print other patterns on them. That's what I do. Took my time to make sure I lined up all of my pattern pieces, and then I finally was happy with that. And it was at this point I realized just how large this was going to be. But then I cut it out, and then we went ahead and moved on to making the base. I believe that this is 6mm foam. Don't ask me for specifications. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. I used my heat gun to take a little bit of the curl out of it because it was in a roll for a really long time, and I just wanted to make sure I could accurately trace the pattern out. I traced the quarter. The pattern is a quarter of the seed. I traced that 4 times because 4 quarters is gonna make a whole. That's math. About the only math I know. Anyway, and then I took my time cutting it out with a craft knife. At certain points I did try to angle the cuts just to see if it would make a difference, but in the end, since I knew I was going to heat shape it anyway, I didn't really have to do that. And here I am using my heat gun to kind of prime the foam so it's going to go into its new shape easier. And I'm using contact cement. So I applied the contact cement to both surfaces that I was going to be sticking to each other. See, it's called contact cement. When it contacts each other, it cements into place. Look at that. And once I got everything centered and connected in the middle, because this is going to be 1/2 of the seed. After I was happy with that, I then started working on the sides of the curve. I finished one side already, but my process for shaping the curves was I would heat it a bit with the heat gun and hold it in place to kind of let it prime itself for its new shape. Then I would apply the contact cement, let that tack up while I worked on the other curve. And then once that was done, I put it together and then used my little clamps to hold it in place while it's set. And after I finished all of the sides, I used my heat gun, focusing it mostly in the center where a lot of the tension would be, where the curve was, like the biggest, like the apex of the curve, I guess. Don't quote me. I don't know all these words, but this is what makes sense in my mind. I used the heat gun to just kind of help relax the tension, so there wasn't so much stress put on all the on the contact cemented edges, so that way they kind of would they wouldn't be tempted to pull apart, basically. Not that they have any actual desires, but you know what I mean. The day after, when everything was all dried, I used my Dremel, the little like small snake attachment, to go along the edges, because I'm going to be contact cementing those together, and I want those to have like a nice edge together. I want them to be cleanly attached and not just like kind of bulkily. Is that a word? We're gonna look that up. Bulkily is an adverb that means something is large and massive, especially to the point of being unwieldy. I have never used that word before in my life. Somehow I knew it existed. Let's carry on. I went around the edges with my heat gun just to kind of get rid of those little bits that sometimes get stuck after you finish sanding. And also just to seal the edges, because I wanted to make sure, the contact cement didn't seep down into it and dry too quickly. All right, so now we're gonna do the pockets and hardware. First, I made sure to mark the orientation that I was going to have the seed in. So the arrows that are pointing towards the outside of the seed, that is where I'm making sure that's the edge that's going to be where the zipper is, which is the top of the seed basically. And then I'm going to draw how I plan on orienting the zipper pockets that I'm adding, as well as just the regular open pocket. Because not only do I want to be able to wear this as like a big like satchel kind of bag, I want to be able to wear it as a backpack as well. So I want to make sure that I'm taking account of how I will be trying to open it when it's like at my side versus on my back and stuff like that. Okay, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, but don't do this, okay? Don't do this. I tested this before I left. I have 2 like 10-pound weights that I put into this, and I walked around my living room for a while. It's fine, beautiful, stunning. Did not know I was going to be carrying more than 20 pounds worth of things in this bag because the strap broke. Okay, I have plans for how to fix this, but don't do this unless you know that you're not putting anything in there except for your phone, your wallet, hopes and dreams. I made some little straps out of faux leather, and I used little key rings to use for loops for where I was going to add the actual strap that was going to carry this as like a crossbody satchel basically. So I sanded that a little bit with sandpaper, just to make sure the contact cement would work and it wouldn't like just slide off of the surface because it was too smooth. Put the little key ring loop through there. And then once the contact cement was ready, I folded them over. And once those loops were dry, I carefully marked out, hello cat, I forgot she was in this shot. I marked out where I was going to be adding the slits to pull the loops through, and I carefully cut those through, making sure to watch all of my phalanges, which is another word for your fingers and toes. And I pulled the loops through, making sure I had enough excess sticking out of the back, and then the rest of it I glued down on the inside of the seed, which would be covered by the lining. For the inside of the pockets, I first traced out how long the zipper was, which would tell me how long the opening for this zippered pocket would be. And then I used some fabric from some old bed sheets that I saved, and I made the little lining bags for the inside. Ain't nobody else about to look in this bag but me, so I'm the only one who was gonna know that it was blue and not yellow like the rest of the lining. That's okay. Most of the sheet, like the hems, were already done, so I literally only had to sew like 2 hems, and I just did 2 quick straight stitches. And I did not feel like sewing the zippers on, so I just used fabric glue to attach them to the pockets. And once that was dry, I glued it to the lining fabric. So this lining fabric actually was a yellow dress that I just couldn't fit anymore. And it was a really pretty color. So all I did was I unpicked it, and then I glued down the seam allowance around where I measured the zipper. And then I let that dry. And then I attached the zipper to the back with glue as well. For the pocket that I wanted to be able to access easily, I ironed on interfacing to the back of it. Shout out to you, Jake, because I'll be overthinking everything and overcomplicating stuff, and then I'll just come ask you a question and you be knowing the answer. I love that for me, and I love you for knowing that for me, so thank you. But he suggested making a pocket that had like a really deep curve in it. So I traced that out, and I made sure that my phone could fit in there comfortably with a little bit of room to fall around if it needed to. But I used my scissors to cut around that, making sure I cut around like a bit of a seam allowance. And for the mouth of the pocket, in addition to cutting out the seam allowance, I cut into it like little slits, and I used little clips to hold them in place while they dried. While the glue dried. I promise I know how to speak sometimes. Apparently right now is not one of those times. After that dried, which was the next day, I went ahead and just sewed that little pocket onto the lining. And yeah, it fit in there very nicely. I was very proud of that. I shifted it to make sure it still wouldn't fall out, depending on the orientation. And then I use this little hand vacuum that I have to clean up all the loose foam from sanding and loose fabric strings. So now we're attaching the lining. I'm just using some more contact cement, and once again, make sure you are ventilated and respirated, people. Oh, also, if you are a crafter who has to use contact cement and other adhesives, use a silicone brush or silicone spatula, because once it dries, you can just peel it off and you don't have to keep throwing away things. Here I am making the little bottom parts of the strap that I have for my purse, and I'm just using more of that faux leather to make the ends of it nice. Again, I just sanded it a little bit and then used contact cement. It was a good idea in theory, but again, it was just not strong enough. But don't do this unless, again, you're gonna be carrying hopes and dreams, because that's all you're gonna be able to carry. So once I got the lining glued in, I went around the edges and I just trimmed off the excess. I used my contact cement on the edges of the foam, just spreading it out thinly. And I used wax paper or like freezer paper between the surfaces that I already contact cemented, because they don't stick to that. So that means I can maneuver them around and then they won't get stuck to each other. I started at the tip of the seed because I knew that was like the best center point I was gonna have, and then carefully pinched them along the edges. And then I used a silicone like sculpting tool, and then just went on my way around the whole edge using my little wax paper piece again. I used more fabric glue to go along the edge, and I used the straps of the dress to cover up that that crack that was in the bottom. And I also used it along the edge where I was going to put the zipper, And once that did dry, I went ahead and attached said zipper using the fabric glue, and I used pins to hold that in place while it dried. Now for the outer shell. I wanted a smooth base to paint on and add texture to, so I just went with some 2mm foam sheets, those really big rolls, and I started on the edge that had the zipper so I could work backwards from that. I just took my contact cement on a silicone tool, and I slowly worked from one end to the other. You could do this in strips, but again, I wanted to avoid as many seams as possible. So I smoothed it out all to one point, and then when I ended up with like a pocket of extra foam, I basically just used heat to stretch it as much as I could, and then I cut away the excess, used contact cement to close the gap as much as I could, and then filled it in with foam clay. After I got both sides done and sanded everything down, I used my heat tool and I started adding a vertical texture to the surface of the shell. I literally just drug it from one end to the other. I did try to add some variations, so I didn't do all the lines completely from tip to top. Some I did like sort of towards the middle, some only reached the bottom, some only reached the top. But I did that on both sides, and then it was on to painting, which I was very excited about because that meant I was almost done. I made sure to tape everything off because I was not about to spend all my time cleaning all of these off. I did 2 layers of black Plasti Dip primer, and I did that outside. They were very thin layers, and I let them dry in between coats. And then this is the sunflower seed that was my inspiration. I didn't do exactly this, but I knew that's kind of what I wanted to go for. I did a test seed. This was another test seed, like little baby that I did. And I used this just to test out my paint mixing because I'm not the best at that all the time. But this actually came out great. And I painted one side of this seed, but I painted each half of the one side slightly different, and I went and asked my lovely partner Jacob again for his opinion, and then I was like, which of these sides look more like a sunflower seed, because I was overthinking it again as usual. And then he was like, the whole thing looks like a sunflower seed. And then I had to step away from it and then go take a break because it was a sunflower seed. So here we are after it's finished, and then I let that dry, and then I hung it outside, and I used either a satin or a matte spray varnish to finish it off. Don't remember. I emptied out the can and I forgot to take notes, so that's my bad. But it came out really nicely. And I'm just taking all the tape off of the different closures and whatnot. I was very proud of how it looked because it came out so nice. Exceeded my expectations. I cleaned off the zipper one more time, and I also added some WD-40 because after using acetone on it so many times, I figured it probably like messed up the finish of the zipper a little and made it a little rough or sticky or whatever. So I just added a little WD-40 to make it smooth. Added my little strap. I ended up decorating the strap later with some sunflowers to match the wig I'm wearing because this is what I wore. And then it was complete. I was unreasonably pleased with this. I ain't gonna lie, it was a struggle. Halfway through, I was like, this looks absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what I'm doing. And then it turned out gorgeous, and I'm very proud. If there's any more ridiculously large things you would like to see me make, or just stuff in general, please comment down below. Let me know. And I will hopefully see you in my next video. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.